Welcome to Camp Constitution Radio with your host, Hal Shurtleff. This show is heard on WBCQ The Planet every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, broadcast out of beautiful Aroostook County, Maine, in the town of Monticello. And it is brought to you by Camp Constitution, which, among other things, runs a week and a day-long family camp. The next year's camp will be July 2nd to the 9th, and you can learn about that and the other things that we have to offer on our website, campconstitution.net. We have a guest online here. I'm very excited. I should say I'm excited about all the guests that come on the show. But it's Professor Willie Soon. Professor, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well, Hal. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, glad to have you. Now, Professor Soon, I initially met him very briefly at a climate change conference in New York City hosted by the free market organization, the Heartland Institute, back in, I think it was 2008. And there was just all kinds of scientists from every conceivable discipline concerning the issue of global warming, from polar bear scientists to atmospheric scientists to people, astrophysics, to weathermen, dealing with even an infectious disease specialist dealing with it, because climate change is supposed to bring malaria back to the northern temperate zone. But anyway, now Willie, you are a well. Why don't you identify? Just give a little background about yourself. Do a better job than I can.
Okay. Well, my name is Willie Soon. I have been a serious scientist focusing on this issue of what causes climate to change over time. And for quite a long time now, I've been studying this issue. As you can see, I'm a slow learner, but I've been doing this for close to 26 years now. The reason, and of course, my background, it's in physics and mathematics, so I do study on basically solar activities, and then another way to learn about solar activities is to study basically stars that is like our sun, so we can get a lot more information far more quicker than basically asking our National Science Foundation or any private enterprise who would sponsor us to study the sun for 1,000 years. So that is not a viable situation. So we sort of come up with a scheme to try to do this work and then gain as much as you can realistic information and facts, of course, and how the physics is working and what causes the suns to vary. And then if the suns vary, what does it do to the climate system? So these are all questions that sounded very, very pure and simple. Unfortunately, the answer would take a lot more than an hour or even a lifetime of learning. But so far, I'm happy to report that we are making significant progress. So, yes, that's who I am, and I've been doing this work at basically Cambridge, Massachusetts. The institution shall be nameless since I am kind of hand-tied and many sort of constraint on me that I'm supposed to only speak about science and basically speak as myself. Has nothing to do with my institution. It's just a workplace for me in that sense.
Right. In other words, what you say doesn't represent necessarily the opinions or positions of where you work.
Right. In fact, it's a declaration that I must make all the time, but you can see the counterpoint doesn't apply to many of the alumnists in the sense that they all could state that they are from such and such prestigious university, from such and such institution, including our own government, like NASA's and all those things. Whereas people who actually speak out against those kind of thing based on evidence, by the way, I would never say anything that is untruthful or wrong. I mean, I often even have the privilege of telling former Vice President Al Gore that, you think you could run faster than me for telling the truth? I bet not, because I'm a pretty fast runner myself. If there is anything about what I say or what you say that is true, I definitely will concur and will tell everybody so. But then, unfortunately, most of what you say is very close to a lie. I mean, to be polite, we'll say half-truth. So this is the kind of problem that I've been having for as long as I've been getting into this topic, actually, without looking for trouble. Put it this way, I'm not one of those troublemakers. I often only seek the truth and want to study this thing quietly, but then trouble comes to me. As another famous of Mark Twain used to say, if my talks begin at 7, the trouble begins at 7:01, so please be aware.
Well, I would refer to you as a climate realist, not a climate change realist, not a climate change denier. And and a little bit of your background. You came to the United States from Malaysia as a 14. You were 14 years old.
That is correct.
And you stayed. That was one of the probably the smartest things you did is to stay in this country. And not only are you in my opinion, a brilliant scientist. I know you're very humble about it. But from where I stand, you're definitely a brilliant scientist. But you are, I would say, a patriot. You understand the principles of liberty and freedom. And that's to me, that's as remarkable as your scientific achievements. Now, what brought you to international notoriety on this subject? Was there one thing that you said or did or published that got the attention of the climate change so-called community?
Well, just to interject a bit, I did came to the United States, of course, but I have a very brief tour in Canada for 9 months. At Toronto, and in fact, the news this morning about University of Toronto trying to play games with all this data, worrying about incoming President Trump, and it make me feel very happy that I did not apply to University of Toronto because it's pretty much a liberal school that wouldn't suit my temperament.
I believe the Prime Minister and I guess the Parliament has implemented this carbon price fixing. I saw a brief article about it today. I didn't read the whole thing, but and there were 2 provinces that are saying we're not going to participate. I don't know if you caught that or not. So
right. So just to continue the story, I did came to the United States, and in terms of what brought me here and what makes me want to stay, I mean, you'll be a real fool actually to not realize that the world is. Most of the rest of the world, including the Western European countries, are basically living under the certain form of tyranny one way or another, right? I mean, they either have a system in which that a person really could not be free in so many ways that, I mean, one would feel ashamed actually even to use the name of freedom for those kind of places. I mean, you have either religious persecution or you even have a societal kind of a caste system, that leverage you whether from the royal families or not, and so on and so forth. That kind of stuff. America, I would say, would be the freest of all free. Although we do have our own problems, but there was just no other choice. I mean, for me, ever since I was a kid. I mean, in school, I just realized that my God, I live in Malaysia, pretty much a very intimidating place actually for any free-minded people. I mean, I just realized very quickly, man, Daddy, can I go to high school somewhere else? And my daddy said, yes, here's a little bit of money that I worked very hard for, and here you go, So I went, and then I finished my high school in 9 months, and then I get to a university, and then one way lead to another. This offer of a postdoctoral fellowship came to come to Cambridge, which is Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. So I took up the fellowship and then decided to keep working. I guess I really do not have an actual answer. How did I get to stay here? But most people have to live by 3 to 5 years. But I ended up staying for already 26 or 27 years here, built up a family, so on and so forth. So I'm pretty much a very happy scientist, put it this way.
And you've traveled around the world giving presentations on topic of climate change and global warming and refuting the folks like Al Gore. You were in Paris at that summit, was it last summer?
Yes. Maybe I should go back to the topic about how do I gain to be so, I guess, hated. I mean, notoriety all over the world in some sense. I would say that I was really minding my own business from about 91 to maybe about 2001 or 2002, okay? If at that time, I guess, hell, even though you're such a nice guy, if you ask me to go, hey, Willie, why don't you come on the radio show and talk about your work, even talking about my work, I would say, no thanks. Simply because I just say that, scientists, I just keep my own mind and just do my own work and, doing that, honing my skill. At that time, I was pretty much still young and immature. But by now, I would say, in 2000, around the time frame of 2000 to 2003, there was a very strange phenomenon because every time when you want to study something, let's say, how climate vary naturally, which means, I guess the best candidate so far would be either the Earth climate vary by itself, which means without any direct causal factors from outside, which is the sun, or the sun could be working together with the internal factors of the Earth, climate system, which we can explain later, and then enforced by basically what is doing by the sun, right? And every time you want to study like that, and then if you don't cite a particular work, it's so-called Michael Mann's hockey stick paper, then you will be under a lot of trouble, because under this kind of a review system between people, the reviewer get to be anonymous, and then the author have no choice but, their name is on the paper, and you will be under all kinds of coercion and collusion, basically, from the journals, from the reviewer, from the editor themselves, who actually was supposed to be an adult person in this kind of business, but they don't take a stand. So, for example, you will be accused of, why don't you cite this work by Michael Mann hockey stick? It's so well known, it's so quote unquote famous. But if anybody who have any ounce of science in them, or worth of science, you will know that this sort of popularity, consensus, and all that is just pure bunk. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just not, science doesn't work that way, right?
I would say
the work itself is very poor quality. No one was criticizing it, actually. The paper was published in 98 and 99, and by 2002, there was still not a single person published any paper basically examining and saying how bad the work is. Then I took it upon myself to say, why don't I try to do some very simple work without prejudging, and try to look at how the temperature history of the world over the past 1,000 years really looks like. So collecting all kinds of evidence, yes, with no prejudice, just collect the evidence. I have up to, a few hundreds of those information, basically each of the studies. So if you criticize me, you would have to criticize that 500 papers, for example, and then massively assimilate all this information, okay, to ask whether there was a time period called the medieval warm period, to ask which happens from about year 800 AD to about 1200 AD, and then ask the question, is there a time period that the Earth is relatively cold called the Little Ice Age, which runs from around 1300 to about 1900 or so, and then ever since then we have started warming up in the 20th century, yes? And you just ask those basic questions. Your answer is actually very affirmative. Yes, there were this worldwide phenomenon of medieval warm period. There was this worldwide phenomenon of Little Ice Age, meaning that at this time, the reason why there was called an ice age is because all the glaciers all over the mountain tops and even some places near coastal region, they grew so large where the glaciers started to float into the ocean, actually. And then in Alps, let's say the Swiss Alps, for example, you have this glacier growing so fast that they're moving down, trying to run over basically a valley, a village under the valley, like people praying in the church. I mean, would be praying that, please, God, don't let this ice mass come and basically take over and ruin our church, for example. So these are phenomena that is fairly real from historical point of view. And then this, of course, immediately run into sharp contradiction with the work produced by Professor Michael Mann from the Penn State right now. He used to be from University of Virginia at that time, and he was a graduate student when he was writing those papers. And it was basically saying that, temperature history of the world look like this. It's basically a flat line from 1,000 or 800 AD to about 1900, flat line basically. It changed very, very little bit. And then it warms up immediately like the blade of a hockey stick. That's why it's called a hockey stick temperature history. And that completely contradicts this picture, right? So my problem is that when I wrote those papers, obviously I was just minding my own business again. And then, of course, I have, as a scientist, you're supposed to say that, I cannot replicate work by Michael Mann, and things are wrong. And you have, lengthy criticism. So, in fact, I have 40 printed pages criticizing that work and while assembling this new work. So my paper is fairly large. And it turns out to be my misfortune in some sense because, again, as a scientist, I stick to science. I don't really care about politics one way or another. But according to the true facts is that our President George W. Bush happens to ask the cabinet member, have you guys seen this paper? That immediately leads me to trouble, obviously, because when it was appearing in a cabinet meeting, I'm in serious trouble. And all these accusations started to come in, how I was colluding with the Bush administration, so on and so forth. I mean, it's just not true.
By the way, where is that paper available online anywhere?
Yes, I think if you Google that kind of paper, it will be everywhere online because I have given it out everywhere.
Okay,
yes, it's a 2003 paper. It's called, essentially, the title is just Climate History of the Past 1,000 Years. And That led me to trouble. And then ever since 2003, ever since that kind of thing, just about everything that I tried to do, including publishing paper on polar bears, because I was really seriously curious about all these claims about polar bear would die off and that kind of stuff based on model prediction. And that seems to be very, very bad form in my point of view. I mean, of what basis? I mean, because we know the computer model is just really, really not only poor representation. In fact, the computer model is just, I don't know how should you put it. I mean, people misunderstanding what these computer models could do, actually. They are really, as the famous word says, is that it's GIGO, right? You either have garbage in and then you have garbage out. I rephrase it. Actually, the way that computer model is being so misused now is actually garbage in, gospel out. This really flipped the whole thing backwards, completely backward. Because you know why? All the policies about future energy use and potential climate change for the next 100 years to even 100,000 years. Those idiots are really running this thing all the way to 100,000 years. And saying that, you know, we're all, you know, the humanity will be doomed, that sort of stuff. It's all based on computer model. Because the empirical understanding and empirical proof for the role of carbon dioxide in the climate system is far from clear, put it this way. In fact, at this stage, 2016, I would say, let's say work from 2003 until 13 years or 14 years, that you realize that actually we are in serious trouble in the sense that people who want to claim carbon dioxide is driving the climate change here and there, this kind of stuff. You just don't even have the proof. In fact, the more we learn, the more we understand that the role of this atmospheric carbon dioxide will be minimal at best, right? Because we can't see the signal of this supposed predicted signal from climate model, actually. This is why things are so bad, that no wonder these people, instead of resorting to scientific debates or open scientific discussion or open scientific kind of, all-out kind of stuff, right? I often say, you know, I'm not married to any theories. I'm not married to any kind of scientific ideas or ideology or agenda, so on and so forth. I'm only married to my wife. That's it. You know, I'm not so crazy about this sort of thing, you know, because a scientist, one of the most important aspects of being a scientist, if you're worthy of that name, is that to have certain humility, a certain sense of trying to revealing the truth, the full truth, you know, not the half truth, not the half lies, not the lies, that kind of stuff. And that's the distinction of what I felt that I'm very proudly stand today. I mean, you can really still, I mean, the offer is still open, as I just spoke the other day at the Washington, D.C. Heritage Foundation, one of the Texas Public Policy Foundation kind of event. And I was telling all the people that did all the wrong thing and all the bad thing to me, I mean, if you are willing to take it back, please do it. Do so. Because you have done some very seriously wrong stuff, and therefore I must tell the world if they care to listen. Because a lot of this thing boils down to censorship, intimidation, you know, what do you call all these big-time bullies and all this kind of stuff? It should not stand in science.
There was a meeting of state attorney generals where they were actually considering taking legal action against so-called climate change deniers.
Well, you bet that my name is also part of it.
You would probably be on the
yes. There was that kind of stuff, of course. But this is exactly what is so troublesome, right? I mean, whereas I don't know if you know the news from a day or two ago, just because the incoming administration wanted to find out, you know, how our resources are being used, for example, so wanted to compile a list of people in Department of Energy that is actually working on climate change issues and all that stuff. These people already cry foul, right? Cry foul about, they're violating our rights here and there. And then one of the person in charge in the DOE said that they refuse to give the list. My God,
really?
You know, I think taxpayers should revoke because, you know, as a taxpayer myself, I would like to know where my money is spent, right? I mean, this is something.
Thing,
yes.
When you said garbage out, garbage in, gospel out, you go to any website of a government, City of Boston, New York City. Mm-hmm. They have climate change departments. They're promoting this Boston 2030, New York and they actually look at this bad science as gospel truth.
Yes, it did. It's all based on model. It's talking about basically the whole Boston will be sink under the sea level change. Unfortunately, they really don't forget that. They forget completely that we are basically still under the influence of the previous ice age that was really 1 mile thick of ice underneath Boston for 20,000 years ago. Our land was pushed down, and then now because the land melted away, we are still moving, right? So
it was interesting. There was a real estate developer, and he's trying to get permits to build on the waterfront, and they're telling him, well, climate change, you're all going to be underwater, so we have to reconsider this. I mean, that's just how bad it is. And now they want to put a 5-cent surcharge in all little plastic bags.
Yes.
So this global warming issue is affecting everybody all over the world. The bad science, and then because of bad science, you get bad political policies that come out of it. Costly policies. You're seeing solar panels popping up all over the world. Wind turbines that are costing millions of dollars and having very little. Again, even if this global warming issue was true, it would have almost no impact on it. That's the sad thing. But you get these people thinking we're saving the planet, and if I use my little plastic bag 4 or 5 times, but which I do anyway, I use it for trash, I use it for other things, so I do recycle and so forth. But it's just costing billions of dollars, and it's all based on bad science. And the schools, all public government schools, and some private schools push this, very strongly push it. And none of these people have any clue. They're just taking this bad science. They don't ask you. Has anybody in Massachusetts, any elected official, asked you to testify at any hearings they've held on the subject?
Of course not. These folks actually were really tramping all over us in some sense. That you can remember the election night. I was so actually a bit outraged actually that we voted for a certain party, and they were already declared the winner of Hillary Clinton. I mean,
that's right.
I mean, before the thing count was even come in, they already declare Clinton as a winner. I mean, this is how much respect they have for people who happen to have a different opinion in some sense. I mean, mine is based on very informed kind of scientific studies on many issues. I mean, you just mentioned something very, very interesting about how all this policy and agenda before any facts, right? I mean, you recall a world most famous story. It was on that CFCs killing the ozone holes and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If I may give your listener something very special in my opinion, because I haven't heard people discuss this thing clearly. I'm never a denier of any facts. The CFC, obviously, it's a special form of chemical. By the way, even the claim that CFC is 100% man-made and couldn't be made by nature, guess what? It's completely false. You can find those you go to Antarctica, there's a active volcano somewhat. It's called Mount Erebus. There is a famous scientist, if you want to know, his name is Gordon Gribov. He used to be former chairman of Dartmouth College Chemistry Department. Have actually measured all the outputs from those volcanoes. You can find CFC, you can find all these other strange chemicals that apparently can only be done by man-made. Nature has a much more profound way of producing some of these chemicals, to put it this way. Although, of course, it must be in a smaller amount compared to what humans are producing. That one is fine. But just the fact to say that, it's all man-made, it's not true. And then now let me get back to the facts. The idea is that, you have this CFC, right? CFC has this particular chemical called chlorine. By the way, it's in your salt, sodium chloride, right?
Right, that's right.
They basically say that because the bonding is so strong at the surface, at the normal air, and then if it goes up, the chlorine, let's say, go up to stratosphere, which is around 10 to 50 kilometers. Let me use kilometers, right? Because that's the number just pop up in my head. That you got CFC up to that level because it attached to some of the ice particles, so the bonding got completely weakened, so the chlorine come out, and then it becoming very destructive in the sense that it will break the ozone, which is O3 chemical rather than O2, right? Which O2 is the air that we breathe in. So this is basically the origin of the claim. By the way, they even gave Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1995 on this. Unfortunately, I really say that this is another one of those very clear case, documented, but very not that much known, including you perhaps, which I'll explain in a minute. These facts are all interesting, but it's not at what you call Nobel's caliber kind of chemistry. I'm really sorry, okay? Even a dumb guy like me could understand all this sort of stuff and so on and so forth. But notice that when they say that this chlorine can destroy this ozone, right? what they actually forgot to tell everybody, even at that time that they were doing all this busy, in the 80s, and I can explain, of course, the true agenda behind this in a minute. But let me explain the sign first. So, guess what? They say, oh, you know what? This chemical can destroy the ozone. But, they have been always so, I would say, almost criminal in intent in some sense, because some of the people are truly smart enough to understand this point that I'm about to tell you. Because they focus the destruction part, but they never tell you how the ozone got made in the first place. Okay? That's the secret hint. So now, I want to ask anybody in the audience, including you, Hal, let's say, okay, first of all, ozone. We have about 90% of the world ozone stay in the stratosphere, that layer, okay, above the troposphere. Okay, troposphere and the surface, we have about 10% of the world ozone, right? So you imagine you have large majority of the ozone. So let me ask you this question now, and then we should answer. This is the thought experiment. We could never do it in real, but then we have an actual answer because we know enough of the science and the chemistry to answer this question. Let's take all the ozone away from planet Earth, atmosphere, and then ask ourselves, how long does it take for the ozone to come back, if it come back at all, right? Even if you have CFE in it, okay? It doesn't matter, okay? And then tell you how. If you will be very worried if let's say that, ozone would only come back 10,000 years from now, right? And then if you will worry if it come back 1,000, 100, or 10 years even. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it's not even 10 years, okay? It will come back in near complete. Complete, okay? If you have 100%, you may come back. If you have a bit of CFC, you may come back 99.9%, right? Not 100%. But guess what? It come back in about 150 days.
Wow.
Guess what? Do you understand what I've just implied here?
Yes.
This is really huge in the sense that it's basically they are trying to tell you that this CFC can destroy the ozone, but they don't tell you how fast this ozone could be made back. Because there's a simple way in which you make this ozone, which is what is the ingredient? You only need O2. Of course, O2 is not running away very soon. It is going away by billions of years,
Right.
But if you have O2 and then you have the sun UV radiation, I hope Al Gore cannot turn off the UV radiation from the sun, right? Then I guess we are safe, right? As long as Al Gore is not a troublemaker, we'll be okay. Because you know why? All you need is these two ingredients. You can make all this ozone back because it's a very efficient way to make the ozone. That's why we got ozone in the first place. This is exactly how misleading this whole business is, right? To try to promote that this is something that we can man-made and then we can cause it and then we can change it. Not further from the truth. This is exactly what is so misleading about this thing. It turns out that this CFC, if anybody were to study the history, it was based on this DuPont, this big company. Again, I'm not banging any free market company. All these other people are dumb enough, put it this way. To buy into this kind of argument, it was basically due to the licensing issue where this thing becoming free no more, so they could not control the patent, right? I don't understand all this business thing, put it this way. All I know is something related to that, and then they want to promote a substitution form of it, HFC, all this other stuff. Guess what?
That's right.
This is how sad this whole business is, actually. But I'm glad that I didn't get into this controversy because I'll be hanged 10 times over if I even get into this sort of thing. All I want to do is that I care about the facts. That's why I figured this thing out. The reason why I know more about this than normal people is because you know why? I want to find out how the sun radiation could impact the Earth system, including the chemistry, the biology, so on and so forth, right? This is what you call a scientist. You research the topic as carefully as you can and don't tell anything that is not true. What I just told you is absolute truth, okay? I don't care what Nobel Prize or how many things you give to people. It doesn't matter. That's what I try to tell you. Consensus, prestigious, name, National Academy of Science, whatever the big matter. I mean, you might as well be Snoop Dogg, right? It makes no sense. For me, it doesn't matter. It's about truth.
We only have a few seconds left. So anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. Where can people you can just go online and put your name in, and you'll find all kinds of. You're on YouTube, Breitbart, all the websites have information about you. So thanks for coming on, and thank you for listening to Camp Constitution Radio, heard on WBCQ The Planet. Until next week, God bless.
Thank you.